definitely appreciate you guys coming. So again, I actually want to have some audience participation, so pressure now. So I think we have like just under an hour or something like that, and would like to have time for questions at the end if we can do that, which I'm going to say we're going to be able to. So, okay, so I want to start with, how many of us have ever had clients who have experienced anxiety at some point in their lives? Okay, now how many of us have experienced anxiety at some point in our lives? Okay, and how many of us are having anxiety right now? Okay. So the thing is, anxiety and other internal, what's usually called like negative states, like overwhelm, fear, and even anger, frustration, like these kinds of things, these internal negative states, they're common. Because not only they're common, they're human. Okay, so that's why I want to talk about anxiety and kind of similar states like that. I'm going to generally just refer to it as anxiety. So I want to talk about anxiety, because again, it's very prevalent and it's human. And then I want to talk about the most common reactions to anxiety. And then I want to talk about some strategies or treatment techniques, things that I do with my clients that is to help them gain what I call internal mastery, which is what the title is. It's internal mastery for next level living. I want to talk about some of the strategies and techniques that I teach my clients. So I'm going to kind of come back and forth to here to make sure I'm getting all my points across, because there's a lot of little things that I really want to make sure that I present to you guys. So, okay, so let me tell you a little bit about my clientele, because this is kind of how this has developed. So I deal a lot with professionals. So like I deal a lot with people who seemingly are very successful. I mean, they are. They're like doctors and lawyers, executives, a lot of entrepreneurs. So I deal with a lot of people like that. And they have achieved a good amount of success, but the thing is, most of them have achieved it although they were like powering through anxiety or powering through different problems, but they've been able to go and like just keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. But that's very exhausting. It's very exhausting to be constantly trying to push and fighting and having that negative critical self voice going on and on about oh well, yeah, you pulled it off before, but I don't know if you're going to pull it off again, or hey, it's that imposter syndrome thing you probably heard of, like, oh, I've been lucky, but maybe my luck's going to work out, or my luck's going to run out, and then everyone's going to know, and everything's going to fall apart. So I see a lot of these pretty seemingly successful people who have all of this kind of weight on top of them. And when you have all that, you usually have sleepless and restless nights. You usually have not so great relationships. It also comes out, physically a lot, headaches, stomach aches, all kinds, like gastrointestinal problems. That's like very common for people to have. So they're kind of experiencing all of these things, and then they just become so exhausted, and over time, they end up feeling they can't just keep going like this. They're stuck. And then most of these people are also go-getters, so they still want to keep advancing, but they've only been able to advance so far with the weight of all of this stuff on top of them. So then that's why they pretty much finally end up in my office then. So, and even when people come for various other reasons, it usually comes down to some basic things, because again, it's human nature, and one of them is anxiety. So I, over time, ended up developing this internal mastery for next level living, because people are looking to succeed, they are looking to be unstuck, they are looking to go to that next level, but there's certain things that would be helpful for them to gain skills so that they can better do that with, again, less stress. So they're not trying to figure out how I'm going to like overpower even more to get to the next thing. So also with anxiety, and this I think is particularly for sovereign health care, people will do anything to get rid of anxiety. So they will do things that are not in their best interest. So a lot of times they will end up doing something to like self-medicate themselves in, because they're trying to like numb or escape, and so they're just like looking for anything to do to get rid of this anxiety. So they usually end up with this idea that they have to like get away from this, they have to annihilate it, they need to just like somehow be done with it. And that they haven't been able to, they oftentimes take that as some sort of like weakness or some sort of deficiency that they have. And it's not. It's just like what I said in the very beginning. it's human. This stuff is human nature. I mean, it is. So a lot of what I do with my clients in the beginning is I provide a lot of psychoeducation so that they can understand what all of this is about and why. So I'm going to my talk is going to be a lot of like what I teach and what I talk to my clients about. That's the same way that I'm going to kind of present this information to you guys. Now, whenever it comes to providing psychoeducation, and especially on this topic, because there's a lot of cognitive neuroscience that has to do with it, it's like I have to find a good balance, because I don't want to be like academic and busting out with the brain and all this kind of thing, but I need to convey enough so that they kind of have an idea about it without getting overly scientific about it. So let me just tell you this. There's a statistic out there about, after I just said don't be so scientific, but being able to, why this is so important beyond the idea of like, hey, we're trying to prevent problems of people, self-medicating or prevent the problems of insomnia and all this kind of stuff, is because it really does promote success. When you are able to better control and actually be even comfortable when you're having anxiety or these negative kind of states, that is actually one of the highest predictors of success. Business success, but even personal success. So again, I see a lot of like business people, and they're always looking out to try and see like, how can I even do better at business? And so they're going around and they're paying like thousands of dollars for all of these different kind of programs and things like this. But the problem is, they never got this level of, hey, how do I deal with the anxiety of things though? Because without dealing with the anxiety of things, it's like they're trying to put all this stuff in their head that's not really able to kind of really be in there and in a way that they can access and then follow through on to like up their A game. So that's what I call it, your A game. So the kind of little ways I refer to this is that your F brain, which I'll tell you what that is, but your F brain is what derails us and messes up your A game. And all these people are trying to get their A game going, but they have a hard time doing that without understanding their F brain, okay? Which goes back to anxiety, which is why this is where I start with people. So, let me ask you guys this question then. And this is what I actually ask my clients. What would happen if we had zero anxiety? So what would happen if we people had no anxiety whatsoever?
Some people wouldn't be driven.
Yes, so people wouldn't be driven. What else? What else would happen if we had zero anxiety?
Probably wouldn't get much done.
Yeah, probably wouldn't get much done. What else? Any other thoughts on what happens to people if they have absolutely, I'm talking absolutely zero anxiety? Okay, I'll tell you. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
We'd probably die. We probably wouldn't last very long because we would just walk out in the street and get hit by a bus. Or we would just decide like, hey, what's that? I don't know, let me eat it.
No cognizance of danger.
Yes. So we would actually die. Like we probably would not last very long. So people don't really think about that or don't really realize that because they're always thinking, oh my God, this stupid anxiety, I want to get rid of it, I must kill it, I must annihilate it, like I must get rid of it completely. So I ask people that question, and usually it is a little bit of a, and for the most part, people get to the part of they're like, oh yeah, I guess we wouldn't be motivated, we wouldn't be moving forward, and yeah, that is definitely true, but it's probably a little bit more important to know we probably wouldn't be alive. Okay. So that already starts making a shift. So to me, what I see is like when I provide certain psychoeducation or I bring these kinds of things up, it's really comforting to people because they also know, again, they're human. Stuff is human nature, and this stuff, like what we're talking about, is completely human nature. And they're not weak, they're not deficient, they're not alone. And the good news is there are things then that you can do about it. So it's not the idea is not to annihilate anxiety, which is what most of them think they're here for. So now they know like, oh, that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to just fight it. So what works better is working with it. But in order to work with it, you need to understand what's going on. Okay, so then again, that's when we get into the whole psychoeducation thing. So this is what I kind of give my clients some little background on what is happening here with people. So Okay, I'm just going to do it like I tell them. Okay, so we, people, we have two primary nervous systems. Okay. We have the side of the nervous system that is the regular nervous system. When we're in that kind of like daily state of our mind and body, we are in this nervous system, which is, you do want to tell them the actual kind of titles for these things. This is the sympathetic nervous system. But the thing is, it's the sympathetic nervous system, but people often refer to it as like rest and digest. Okay, because when you're in that state, you are in a more relaxed state, and you can do stuff that your body needs to do, like digest food and things like that. But on the cognitive side, this is what allows us to access our prefrontal cortex, all the executive functions. So it's hopefully you are a rational, logical person who can think and is not being impulsive. So that's the whole, this side of things, and hopefully we're pretty much here. Okay, now, our brains, so remember I was talking about human nature, our brains have they have an important job. And our brains have so much to do. Our brains like to be efficient. So it's like running around doing 10,000 things a minute, and it's trying to like be efficient at what it's doing, and it usually does. But a lot of times it will become efficient at something that's not healthy or something that's not adaptable. So, here we are living our lives, and again, we need anxiety so that we don't die. So that's a pretty big job. Our brain, that part of our brain has a huge job. It's trying to keep us alive. Okay, so it takes it seriously. Okay, but you would want your brain to take it seriously because it's trying to keep you alive. But what happens is it gets so good at that it's constantly scanning your environment to see if there is anything threatening. So it's not even anything threatening, it's anything surprising. So anything threatening, anything surprising. And even things that are considered to be neutral, a lot of times that will also be taken as a negative or a threat. Because again, human nature, our brains have a negativity bias. So it's kind of out there and it's kind of looking for danger. So as soon as it detects that, it will flip you into the other nervous system. Okay, so, I think I may have said it backwards. The rest and digest, the one that is where we are relaxed and we can think logically, that's the parasympathetic nervous system, because it's the other side is the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, once we get flipped into that side, that's where we run into this problem. And this is where I call it the F brain, but we run into this problem because resources are now taken away from your prefrontal cortex because it's going to the parts of your brain that are preparing you to do, which you guys have probably all heard, fight and flight. Mm-hmm. Now everybody heard fight and flight? Mm-hmm. Okay, there's also freeze. So a lot of times people don't realize that there's that third thing that tends to happen, which is freeze. So fight, flight, and freeze, hence the term F brain. So that's what I call it. It's like when you go into your F brain. So when you go into that side and you go into the F brain, you are not here anymore now. So you cannot really think logically and rationally, and you have a harder time not being impulsive because your body is being prepared to really literally do this. Either like fight with someone, so fight with someone, or fight with someone. So like couples, or when you're just encountering another person, like fight with them, or you're gonna take off. So you're actually literally going to like run away from the situation, or just leave the situation, or just like disconnect from the situation. And then we have freeze. And that is the total shutdown. Like that's the whole like deer in the headlights, boom, possum playing dead kind of thing. Like everything just slows down. So all of this stuff is automatic, and all of this stuff is like instantaneous. So chemicals are being released by your brain, and you're not consciously deciding these things. So and you can't, because if you were to consciously decide, you'd probably get killed. Like you'd probably die. So again, your brain had to be efficient, it had to do things quickly, it had to err on the side of keeping you alive. So we have this bias to do this, to be this way. So our brain will decide, okay, are we gonna fight this thing? Are we gonna take off from this thing? Or are we gonna go into freeze? And if it thinks it's going to fight or flight you, it will release certain chemicals to prepare you to do that. If freeze comes into the situation, it'll override the fight and flight and shut you down. So that's what's happening. So all this stuff is happening in your body, and it is automatic. So letting people know this that again, it's not you that just can't decide to do something, or it's not you that just can't seem to whatever. This is life, this is human nature, and we have a bias towards the negative. Our brain wants a story. This is the other thing I tell them. Our brain wants a story. And it will make it up if it has to. And it will make it up from whatever little information or no information that you have. And so it will do that, and boy, do we get good at it. And it will usually make up an inaccurate and negative story. Because again, we have that negativity bias, so it tends to go to the negative. And for some reason, we people just have a lot of inaccurate thinking. So you need to be aware that this is all what's happening here. So when you are sitting there waiting for, your partner who's now 10 minutes late, or whatever is happening, you need to know this is what your brain is doing. Your brain's making up that story of why they are late, why are they not here. And again, it's going to usually go to a negative, and it's going to go to inaccurate. And then what starts happening? Your heart rate starts accelerating. Like all this starts happening, and all of that is taken as threat or danger. Because our brains also don't know the difference between real and imagined. So, there really is no fire coming at me, but if my brain thinks that there is I'm going down in flames, even though there's not an actual fire, it takes it the same, and it does its job and it's good at it, so it will flip you into that other side. So I give a lot of psychoeducation so that clients are aware that this is what's happening and that they need to be aware of this, because there are plenty of things to do to help yourself with these things. So I think I was telling you guys earlier, when people call me, and if they happen to say that they're calling because they have anxiety or something's going on with them, I always tell them, great, because if you're going to have a problem, you want it to be anxiety. Because we do know so many things to do for anxiety. So, okay, before I move on to anything else, any questions on any of that or anything that you guys want to ask? Okay, so let me check time. Okay, Okay, so there are lots of things to do to be able to help people with this. And there's two things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help them with the first part of it, which is the recognizing what's happening, stop beating yourself up for it, because beating yourself up for it makes it even worse. Also the thing about thinking that you need to annihilate anxiety and that it's like your enemy, that also makes it worse. Because if you have that attitude about it, that you have to just kill it, then you're characterizing your anxiety as a villain. What you're actually doing is seeing your anxiety as a threat, which then puts you back into that side, and so you can't deal with it then because you are, kind of out of control on the other side of things. So this is why you need to, I go through all of this so that they can see, hey, your brain is really not out here to mess you up. And actually, what I tell my clients is, you actually need to compliment your brain. Your brain likes compliments. So you need to compliment your brain and talk to your brain. So you either can say hey brain, or refer to it as your brain. You can, sometimes I actually do have them make a name for it. So you could come up with a person name for it. So the last person I did this with, they just came up with Bob. So, but you can, hey Bob. And no, I'm not trying to promote multiple personalities. Sometimes when I do get into this, people are no, we're not doing multiple personalities. It's just how can you, because really it's about how you're talking to your brain. Okay. Now how you talk to your brain is very cognitive though. So I back people up to talk to them about the physiology of things, because when I'm giving them techniques to deal with things, we actually have to start with the physiological interventions. Okay, and I'm going to give you a handout that kind of frameworks how I go over this with people. But we need to start here with the physiology part of things, and then all the different techniques I give them, all the different exercises I have them do, they fall into various different categories that I'm going to give you this handout on. But once I get them in a good place this way, they're better able to be comfortable and control their anxiety, Now, that's when you can really take and learn all the other things to promote yourself and to get yourself to hone your A game, to be more successful. You know, go ahead and buy those whatever $1,000 programs, like all the things that you've been trying to do, you'll better be able to execute those techniques once you get this side under control. So that's usually the kind of the two phases that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some handouts here, because this is how I start off everybody with a framework on how we're going to work on things. So let's see, I have way many. There are 3 handouts, so there are 3 pages each. So I'm just going to give you a little stack. You can, and then I'll give you guys a little stack. So, does everybody have one? No copies? I mean, I have plenty of copies, but there's more than one there that you can kind of grab. Okay. So this is also something that I ended up developing and working with my clients, because the number one thing to get started is you have to be aware. So people have to be aware, and not only is being aware going to help them, but they need to report to me. so the better they're aware, and the more accurate they are, because again we have connected thinking, the better that's going to be for themselves and then also for them reporting to me. But just going and saying like, hey, be more aware, people are like, okay, I don't know what that is, right? Okay. Yeah. So I came up with a way of kind of frameworking them for it. Now, when I very first did this, because this is already, I've been doing this for years, so when I very first did this, I was just kind of talking and I was saying, you know, these categories. But I didn't realize that it actually made this acronym PEACE until more recently. And that's because I was, you know, I do a lot of stuff that has to do with like marketing and things like that too. And I remember talking to someone and I'm like, this is ridiculous, all of these acronyms. Not everything is going to fit into an acronym. And so then I had that conversation, and later that night I was like, well, let me see, this is something that I go over with everybody. Let me see if I could make an acronym out of it, because it seems like it couldn't be. And within a few minutes I was like, oh, if I rearrange my order and I maybe call it, you know, because I'm like, I need some vowels. So if I kind of call certain things, you know, with a different way of saying the word, and lo and behold, it came out peace. And I was like, wow, all right, so now it is the peace process. Okay, so this is the way that I give people to framework how to be aware. So how aware are you with your physiology? And this is actually where we do need to start, is physiology, because being in either of those 2 nervous systems is going to influence whether you're going to be successful in intervening on this. So how aware are you of your physiology? Are you aware when your heart rate changes, your breathing changes, you have a headache, stuff like that? Okay, so that's all the physiology realm. And then the E is for your emotional realm. Are you aware of your emotions, and can you label them? And then are you accurate at it? Okay, so that's what the E stands for, is emotions. A is for actions, which, see, I used to call it behaviors, but I needed a vowel. So it's actions, which is your behaviors, like your observable behaviors. Anything that you're doing and that people can see, so those are your actions. And then C is for cognitions, and the primary thing I do have people do in the very beginning here is concentrate on their thoughts. And it's like literally verbatim, what are you thinking? Okay. Now, E, the last E is for, I just go ahead and kind of call that little group extrasensory, because they're kind of little different things. And a lot of times people are not really sure what I'm talking about, but they're things like energy, and your own energy, other people's energy, intuition, and spirituality. So I will always make sure, like, are people aware of what I'm talking about? Are you aware of what I'm saying in these last categories? That's where I mostly have the discussion is on that last category, because that's one where people aren't quite as sure about it. But what I tell them is, all of these things are related to each other. And all of these aspects of yourself they are the things that will kind of cycle on each other and snowball. And they will snowball into the reason why you're usually here. Like a depression, an anxiety, even an addiction. Like, these are the things that, like, circle on each other. So I need you, like client-wise, I need you guys to be very aware of yourself. And here's a framework on how you can now be aware of yourself. So to help them to get that going, I have them do a little journaling exercise using this framework. So that's what the second page is about. And I really impress upon them, I need them to do it in the exact layout that I have it. And there's a couple of reasons why I want them to do it this particular way. So what I let them know is, like, between the time I'm seeing them this time and like the time I'm going to see them again, I want them to come up with at least 2 experiences that they have that is touching on their goals, like what they're trying to achieve. And I want them to fill this out using this framework. And the way I want you to do this is I want you to tell me a little bit about the situation. But it really is just a little bit. I don't want people going, well, I got into an argument, and then I said this, and then she said that, and then I said this, and I don't want them going into all of the detail like that, because basically that's just having them ruminate in writing. And rumination is something I talk to them about all the time. We need to stop ruminating, especially since a lot of our ruminating is this negative inner critical voice, this anxiety thing, okay? So we're trying to not have that happen. I don't want you doing that even in the exercises that I'm giving you. So this kind of goes on the point about journaling in general, which I know a lot of people like to journal. And so I will tell people, if you are a journaler and you actually really do think it's helping you, then I don't want to tell you not to do it, but I'm just letting you know that a lot of times free journaling is just rumination and writing, and it actually makes it worse. So that's just something that I do bring up with people, but I don't want to like take something away from them if they really think it's helping. But what I end up having happen is most people end up realizing, yeah, it is. That is making it worse that they've been doing that. So not only are they ruminating in their head, in their mind, and then ruminating by telling every single person their terrible story, but then they're writing down their terrible story too. So they're like, a triple threat ruminating over here. So it's like, So instead, what I want you to do is just briefly tell me what the situation is, because I actually don't even have them tell me so much detail, because I don't want them ruminating on it, because what I want them to do is focus on this part, the peace part. So when this situation happened, what did you notice was happening with you physiologically, emotionally, so then down the line? And I do want them to write it in columns. I tell them this and they'll come back with it in the other way. But I want it to be in columns, because when you actually fill this out, you literally see, because if you're writing it, black and white, you literally see the connection between all of these things. So when they actually see it, they start getting it, but when they actually see it, it kind of like more solidifies for them, and especially if they handwrite. So I always have all my clients do homework by handwriting. So this is a little framework I give them to help them with the how to be aware. And then it also just so happens, in a beautiful way, that all of the interventions and techniques and strategies and things that I'm teaching them fall into the same categories. So I can teach you a physiological way to deal with this issue. I can teach you an emotional way to deal with this issue. I can even teach you an energetic intervention on how to deal with this issue. So it also helps to organize that too. So this is how I start everyone off, to give them a little framework for how we're going to work on this, and then it helps them to start getting language too on how to start talking about this. So, okay, so any questions on this? Does this make sense to people, or? Okay. Oh, yes.
The thing that makes maybe part of this least clear, which you said is also the case with your clients, is the extrasensory part. Like when you're talking to them about what are they experiencing intuition-wise, what sort of thing do they put down?
Yeah, so a lot of times people aren't quite sure what I am talking about when it comes to intuition. A few people are able to kind of answer that. So the way I talk about it then is I say, okay, well, have you ever heard the thing of like, oh, I got a gut feeling about something? Now, almost everybody has heard that, which I'm assuming everybody's heard that about having a gut feeling. Okay, so here we go with the psychoeducation part again. So I end up kind of doing a little talk about intuition. So usually people will talk about it as having a gut feeling about something. And that's what we're talking about for intuition. So it's not a cognitive knowing, it's not a fact, like, you know, it's the capital of Arizona. And it's not an emotional feeling, it's a knowing. It's a knowing without a rational kind of like objective connection to it, okay? And usually it is a visceral thing, usually it is a thing, and it usually is your stomach. And so why I think we probably have come up with that term gut feeling is because they've had a lot of more recent research that has shown that we have a lot of, we actually have a bundle of nerves that come in our stomach. And you know how they, you know, talk about neurotransmitters, and it was kind of usually the idea of like, oh, you got all these neurotransmitters in your brain. You have more neurotransmitters in your stomach than you do in your brain. And most people didn't know that or didn't realize that. So there's more recent research that I think is actually backing up what intuition is all about in a scientific way. So we also thought, you know, information goes like brain down. It does, but it also goes gut up. So there's a lot of stuff, which also I think explains, or at least would make sense, on why, again, specifically anxiety, people with anxiety tend to have gastrointestinal problems, and vice versa. So there's a big connection between these two things, and I think intuition kind of got thrown in there as part of that. So this is the psychoeducation thing again, and I kind of like teach them a little about what that is and why that's happening. But that's what intuition is. Now, most people, again, they don't know what that is, or they don't really think about it, or if they are aware of it, they don't pay attention to it, and they even discount it. Now, women tend to do this more, so women tend to be a little bit more intuitive or in touch with that, but they also will tend to discount their intuition. So again, I deal with a lot of business people, so in addition to helping them with all these things, getting their intuition online, that really propels them above pretty much all their colleagues, because most of their colleagues are not out there thinking, oh, I've got this intuition, now let me use this for business. But it's helpful. It's helpful for everything. All of these are helpful, and intuition is one of them. So that was kind of a long answer. Does that?
It does. Maybe an example is if somebody was trying to, you know, write down, you know, what was happening with them physically, emotionally, actually, sort of the thoughts were, and then just like their gut level.
Yeah. So let's say
what was happening.
Let's say the situation was that they were having a fight with their partner or something like that, and it could be like romantic partner, it could be business partner, okay, whatever it is. But they were having something like this. So they're going down the line, you know, oh, my heart rate started racing. So you know they're going down to this whole thing. Now, when it comes to the intuition part, it could be something if they were attuned to it. It could be that they have an intuitive knowing that this is not like an intentional attack. This is not an intentional like malice on my partner's side. This is not something like that. So it's going against kind of that negative bias, because we have that negative bias to kind of think those things. But your intuition could actually now give you some information that maybe says your kind of negative bias may not be the case, because your partner probably really is not out to destroy you or to, you know, be mean to you on purpose. So that could be intuition, or you also have an intuition of that we are going to resolve this thing, and this business project or our relationship or whatever it is going to be able to move forward. So, or if you're trying to decide between business proposals or something like that, you can get an intuition about maybe which is the direction that you want to go. So it does take a little bit. Most people are not attuned to it. So there's actually things that I do with people to help them build it up, and then it's how you take that information. But take it with everything. Don't just, it's not wise to make a decision based on just one of these things. And that's why I present it again in this whole way, because it's a comprehensive way of looking at it and gaining information in all of these different ways. Because usually when you end up with the kind of the decision or the what you're going to do, you're more confident in it then, because all of these things are online, and then you end up feeling it. So I have people do this in the beginning of writing it out, but the idea is it will be like this. In their mind at any moment, boom, they can tell you, this is what's going on with me in all of these ways. So that would be like a potential example of what intuition is. Did that help? Okay.
It could be a bad thing too, like for some people, right? Like it could.
Yes, which is why you don't take any of these things as just that one thing. Because if you take it just that one thing, you know, you're going to be more likely to possibly be off track. Which is why you got to take it all in totality. It's all comprehensive. And the more they align with each other, which is when you see it going across this way, that's when you really can see how they're aligning with each other. And the more aligned it is, then usually the more wise the decision, and the more confident you're going to be in the decision, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this?
Are you seeing that people are getting stuck at a certain rate, like beyond the emotion, that they're unable to have any kind of observable behavior? Like, do you see people getting stuck in that? Like, oh, yeah. I got past the first two, I noticed my heart rate was racing, and you know, like I started feeling this certain way, and then they just stay there. Like, do they fill out part of it, or can they block it out after it's done?
Most people, I rarely have anyone come back where it's totally fleshed out in all domains. Okay. So when I have them come back, then I go over it with them, because I need to see, are you able to see these things, and how accurate are you at it, and that you're discerning between them and you're not misinterpreting. Because I'm sure you guys have had this all the time, where you say, oh, and what did you think about that? And they say, well, I was sad. Or like, well, how did you feel about that? Well, I thought blah, blah, whatever. Okay, because people are mixing stuff up. I'm asking for a thought, you're telling me a feeling. I'm asking for a feeling, you're telling me a thought. I can ask you for a feeling and you tell me a physiology, physiological response. Okay, so people are also doing that. And that will happen. They come back and writing, and we're reading down their column, and it's like, yeah, but that's physiology, that's not emotion. Or, yeah, that's emotion, that's not behavior, or whatever it is. So, yeah, it takes a few rounds to go over with people to kind of really help them know what's happening in each of these areas and discern between them. And then I have like these, I have these kind of standard lines of techniques and things that I teach on each of them. So I kind of gave you a little bit on the intuition one, but to go to your feeling ones, this everybody usually needs this too about emotion. Because they will usually say, well, I was angry. And that's it. Okay, like it just is angry. So I talk to them about it, because what are the odds that you really just had one emotion? Okay, so then we get down to there was probably fear, hurt, disappointment. Okay, so there's this whole thing I do around emotions and the language for emotions, because people do not usually have the vocabulary for these things. They really don't even have it for the intuition or the energy, but they also don't even have it for the emotion. So let me see what time it is, because I can maybe tell you a little quick thing. Let me maybe tell you my little quick thing on that. So what I tell people is like, it's like crayons. Okay, so I don't know if you guys remember, but I think they have like that little box of like 8 crayons. Okay, and then there's that like 256 or something box with the cool sharpener. Okay, you know that one? Like everyone wanted that? Okay, so what I tell them is, think about it, it's like crayons. Emotions are like crayons. Because do you have the vocabulary to name your emotions? Most people have less than 8. And then I did this in my last talk. So I'm not, I'll just tell you what I did. You don't necessarily have to do it here. But what I tell people is, on the spot, name as many negative emotions as you can. And then I get the deer in the headlights thing. People rarely get past 3 or 4. Okay. On the spot, tell me all the positive emotions you can think of, the labels, name of them. Again, people rarely get past 3 or 4. A lot of people tend to be better at the negative than the positive, but they don't get very far. So it's like you're dealing with, they're living life with an 8 box of crayons. You could have hurt, but you may not have that crayon. You may have red and orange. You can have anger and fear, but you don't have pink, which is hurt. So you're going to misidentify. You're going to tend to misidentify them because you only got this crayon. Wouldn't it be nice to live life with 256 box of crayons? And then that's when I have 4 sheets worth of feelings that I give people. So, and then just physically showing that. I actually have like 13, but I don't want to overwhelm people. So what I physically hold up 2 full out, like, I think there's like 3 or 4 columns each of positive, 2 negative. And so then I kind of get into that. So each of these realms, these are like interventions and skills and techniques that I teach people, and it helps organize that too. So that's a little bit, more on the emotion side of things. Okay. Any other? Back to questions at this time? So now, going with the physiology. Because I'm going to teach people all this stuff. And I'm teaching them all these things, I'm giving them all this background, I'm giving them all these steps for these interventions. But if you get flipped into that side of your nervous system and your resource goes from here, you're not going to be able to access it. So I need you to know how to get yourself back, because that's the first step for you to then be able to access everything else that I'm teaching you. So the number one thing I tell people to do, and this is your first number one intervention, is a breathing exercise. Okay, now I always ask people, do you know about breathing exercises? Oh yeah. Okay, how do you do it? So I always get deer in the headlights for most of my things that I ask people, and they're like, well, you breathe in, then you breathe out really hard. I'm like, okay, let me teach you a specific way, because again, there's actually science behind why breathing exercises work, and a lot of times people think they're deep breathing and they are not deep breathing. So this handout, I just give this basic handout. So I don't know if you guys know who Dr. Andrew Weil is. He's a pretty famous guy. So this is kind of like the one that he always talks about. So I just give him the same one that he has. So it's called 4, 7, 8. And that's because you are breathing in your nose only for 4, holding for 7, and then harder out your mouth, harder, slower for 8. Which is kind of a long time. To blow out kind of consistently for 8 count is pretty long. But that's the most important part. That's the key to a deep breathing exercise. You have to have the exhale be longer and harder. That's what makes it work. So when you're doing that longer, harder out your mouth, and you should hear the noise, your diaphragm is being kicked up back into what is your vagus nerve. That's what it's hitting. Come up here and then help with getting you back into the parasympathetic side to help put you back over here. So this is why I teach this one first, is I need people to know how to calm themselves and to get themselves onto the other side so they can access everything else. And it's a quick, easy thing. So you can do deep breathing exercise. There's other things too. Just even doing, like, if you just were, so I have people do this. So you sit down, actually, what time is it? Because maybe I'll have you do it. Okay, maybe let's try it. I don't know, you're not in the most relaxed state, but just because I think if you actually feel it, you can, unless you already do this with your clients. But what it is you sit in a relaxed state, go ahead and you're gonna need to touch your stomach, so you may need to move yourself out of the way, but close your eyes, kind of relax there for a second, and pick a hand and put one hand on your stomach. So everybody just go ahead and do that for a few seconds, I'll tell you when. And if you can, just to kind of try to relax a bit more, just shut your eyes and do that for a bit. Okay, so now, go ahead and open your eyes. Kind of assess how you think you felt about that. Now, close your eyes again and do it with the opposite hand. And do that for a bit. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time. I usually have people do it for longer, but hopefully that was enough time for you guys to see. So did you notice anything the first time, the second time, anything different? Like, what were your guys' experience on that?
I felt more relaxed the second time.
You felt more relaxed the second time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about anybody else?
Felt heavier. The second time I did.
So the second time you felt better?
Or the arm felt heavier.
Oh, the second time
the breathing felt different,
Uh-huh.
like more relaxed.
Okay, okay.
The second time was harder for me because the first time I used my right hand, which I was more familiar with.
Yes.
The second time I used my left hand,
Uh-huh.
and it just felt a little bit more uncomfortable to go
Yes.
longer time to.
So that is the case for most people. And this is why I have them do both hands. Because for most people, it is a different experience. And one of them is a more comforting, relaxing, calming, and the other one is usually a more like uncomfortable kind of weird one. So I want them to know, I want them to see, one, do you even feel that? Do you feel it in the first place? And then do you feel the difference? Because now you know for sure what hand is better, use that. So that's another kind of quick physiological intervention that you can just do to try and help yourself to make sure you stay or kick yourself back into that side of your nervous system. Now, I see a lot of couples also. I teach them these things like immediately because they have to actually use it in the session. Because if we're going to try and talk, they're going to want to go to their fighting thing, and I'm like, deep breathe, put your hand on your stomach, go. So there's several of these kinds of things. Even just putting your hand on your head. So, this is what's just human nature is interesting. So I'm sure that you all know that. That's why you're in this business. But people will do things automatically, and they don't even know why. But people will do, like when something happens, people will tend to go like that, right? Like, have you seen that or done it yourself, where you put your hand on your head, like that, or like that? Okay, because things are actually happening. When you put your hand on your head, it's actually trying to bring the blood back to your prefrontal cortex. Like, that's why people do that. When you go like this, because something happened, that's a version of trying to go into freeze, because you're trying to stop breathing. So there's kind of interesting things that people do naturally. Like, again, our brain is pretty awesome, and our brain and body tries to do things to help us. It's just that we didn't really, most people don't really know what that's about. Okay, but once you kind of give it some context and you teach them that, then that's something really easy that you can do. So, okay, let's see what we think. Okay, so maybe let me kind of talk about, so these are things that I get people to do to start off this whole process. And then once they get better at being able to control and be more comfortable when they're anxious and have these negative states, now you're going to be better able to work on the other side, which is the, hey, how do we become even more successful? How do we hone our A game? How do we do all of these, keep going in the direction, get unstuck and all of this kind of thing? So there's a whole variety of exercises that I put people through. So I'm just going to mention a couple of them. So there are these, I call them the 4 fundamental questions that I have everybody write on. And these definitely get the deer in the headlights look. So when I present it to them, I just have like a worksheet. I didn't bring copies of it because all it basically says is the question on the top of it, and you're supposed to write on it. Okay, so the first question is, who am I? So they need to write to answer the question of who am I. So as soon as I say that, deer in the headlights, people are just like, okay. And then the next question is, what do I want? So who am I? What do I want? And the third one is, what do I stand for? So those are basically values, but what do I stand for? And then the fourth one is, what is my purpose, or why am I here? What is my purpose? It's getting that purpose. Now, I usually don't give these all at once because I need to work with and kind of process these out with people. So I give them like one at a time because I need you to come back and then we go over it. And there are typical things that happen. People have a real hard time with these things. Who am I? A lot of times they don't know, and the first things that they can finally kind of think about has to do with like roles. And it's usually roles other. Mother, father, brother, partner, like all this kind of thing. Where are they? Like, where's the I part of that? What do I want? Same thing. People come back with certain things, and already knowing them and talking to them, I'm like, that's what you want? Because they end up discovering, oh wait, that's what my parents wanted, that's what my spouse wanted, So I have them go through these series of questions because I'm trying to, now this is more like the foundation part, because everything is going to be built off of this. Because again, nobody's perfect, so you're not going to be able to control the anxiety all the time, or you're not going to experience it at all here and there, and we actually need to. So the more you get this foundation of things that I put people through, even when you're under stress, you're going to better be able to access it because you've now got it in there versus trying to come up with an answer to these things, on the spot every time. So these are just kind of the beginnings and a little bit about what I do with people to try and help them with dealing with anxiety, which is pretty prevalent, and again, human nature. The more we can control that, the more we can be comfortable with that, the more successful that we can be. And then the more we are able to take any other intervention, any other strategy, any other self-improvement program or whatever we're doing, the more we're gonna be able to take that stuff to finally get unstuck, to make it to that next level and not be stressed out, not have to rely on substance to deal with that, not have to rely, or not have to be, you know, an insomniac person who's like working all the time. You can have those things without having all of the struggle and the power through that you used to. And I've seen it happen over and over, and that's what I like to see. So, all right, I think that's